Good morning. Hope you guys have enjoyed Copenhagen, the Merchants Harbor. I got to travel a little bit. Yesterday, I got to go into downtown and travel and see some of the very exciting places, all the castles and historic significance of being in this city. Hope you enjoyed your time so far. This is the last day. Thank you for showing up early in the morning. Many of you stayed up late, probably last night. The talk I'm going to be giving on is mostly has to do with research done by some of the best numerical method mathematicians you can imagine in the country who've been working on doing models for forecasting data that has very nonlinear, unexpected behavior or repeated unexpected behavior. And many of these behaviors individually could be predictable, could be manageable, could be even be able to respond uniquely, but combinatorially they get very complex. And the talk is going to give the new model that's come up called the ALM. It's a very native model. Guys, if you've been to the Pydantic talk, you can get a very nice scikit tool now to do this prediction. Prediction, I say carefully, it's really forecasting to see how much of the new events that is coming is likely to impact your future. So that's in case I wander off into talking about other things, I just don't want you to forget the main purpose of the talk is to try to understand how much of your new trends that you're facing are going to impact your future long term. And some of these events that happen to you may not be that significant, may not even last very long. So the whole idea is to try to understand these events as distinct nonlinear patterns that add together to add complexity, right? So there's our copyright. Just walk through that one. So I work as the principal engineer at CERT Coordination Center, part of Software Engineering Institute at Carnegie Mellon University. Our primary job has been mainly supporting the US government in doing long-term research on software, and the cyber itself is more part of the CERT's mission. And my division is basically Threat Analysis Directorate, where what we're trying to do is at least three distinct things that we do. One is the threat analysis from the attacker side, what types of tools, techniques, and things are happening from the attacker, how vulnerabilities are changing is the second division. The third division is looking at a lot more of the AI-related securities or forthcoming technologies, security issues. So this is the team I wanted to tell you about. Almost, they all like the graph right in the middle. They are very, very significantly numerical methods and statistic experts. All these guys have been working together to solve these very difficult problems, including the latest paper they put out that has come out in Nature is something I'll recommend to you. Hopefully, we'll send you a link also as part of this that helps you read the paper on. The work they've done is quite significant, and if I fail to represent it fully, you can shoot the messenger. But the authors have really, really clear answers to some of these very, very difficult problems in being scientific about data that's unpredictable, that seems non-scientific, that seems unreasonable. So I'll start the whole idea here is to try to forecast what is near future. If you guys have been walking around downtown, you might have run into many of the philosophers, Hans Christian Andersen, the poet and the fabled storyteller, and many other people. One of my favorite is Søren Kierkegaard. He's native to here, Copenhagen. So he is a philosopher who really challenged the de facto thinking of his times, and many of the people have made the life to look very logical, very predictable, but he kind of challenged it by saying life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards. So we're going to do two parts. The phase one of this talk is going to focus on how to understand what happened backwards, what are the components that contributed to where we are today, and using that to live forward, forecasting. Can we properly forecast this particular data? The assumption is the time is one factor that's always going to be moving, right? And it's always going to be growing. whatever data you're looking for, whether it's incidents that are coming in, vulnerabilities that are coming in, or malware that's coming into your repository, all those are going to be growing and changing with different deflection and inflection points, meaning in the graphs, they're dropping and sometimes rising beyond your expectation, beyond your ability to resource and satisfy the needs from your SOC or from your operation center. So the work actually tries to look at models by understanding what has happened in the past. And when something happens, how do you very quickly pivot to see how significant this is going to be? The method is called ALM, the Adaptive Logistics Mixture Logistic Model. So if you research that, you'll find lots of good papers recently come out. The two keywords I want you guys to look at when you go back to your SOC and you want to do better planning is this technique called ALM, and the other keyword is online change point. I'll be talking about this quite a bit through the talk. So understanding life backwards, there's a problem with our modeling typically. Many real-world problems contain very nonlinear dynamics. So traditional curve fitting is you try to find a curve of changing events. Many times they're growing, they may be up and down a little bit. Overall, your number of things you handle is likely to go up, and it's going to stay up for some time. And this, in a way, some of this has this very nonlinear dynamics in between that was introduced. Specifically, if you look at something like the COVID infection that I was talking about, there's been a very big impact of COVID, even to this day, as to how our emergency response in the US today acts, especially states like New Jersey and California had to basically adapt to a completely new model, and that's become part of the way they operate from this day on for resourcing, for keeping things like ventilators ready. So these are very unpredictable, nonlinear dynamics that get introduced, that you get pushed forward into your life, totally unexpected. And the classical ways of modeling can predict one of them in isolation or can use one of them to understand what is happening in a particular time, but as they additively become complex, it's very difficult to really understand how this combinatorial dynamic process is behaving, all right? The other idea I want you to think about is emergence or activation of a particular type of pattern that's coming into your data. We talk about this quite a bit in infection and disease control. When there's a new variant of a virus or variant of a bacteria even that can actually respond faster to your antibiotics and something else, it's very, very difficult to respond to it properly. These are called emergent behaviors. They're activated due to some environmental behavior, and now the changes basically start affecting an active process that you thought you had control of, right? So this new adaptive model, what do we do with the new adaptive model? I'm going to talk about it a little bit in pieces. The adaptive model, what it does is basically combines a number of nonlinear dynamics that actually can be distinctly understood and together also be understood. That's the whole innovation in the adaptive logistic modeling. The nonlinear dynamics, like I talked about, they deviate from any of the modeling techniques we have today, and the emergent behavior I was talking about, it's very challenging to use the traditional feedback loop, meaning you could treat some of this like a control system where you have an input, output, the output is increasing, use that as a filter for increasing the amount of activity you'll do to control the output. And those type of very simple control theory-like models cannot even keep up with these things. The stochastic models can do a little bit better. The stochastic, basically probabilistic, is a fancy word, but basically it's probability-based models can do a limited representation, but this adaptive logistic is actually a combination of multiple stochastic models together in a linear pattern. Basically combine a whole bunch of nonlinear patterns in a linear way to get this method, right? Once I get to a graph and some examples, it'll make more sense. I'm sorry, it's a little bit of more theory and math that I'm trying to make sure you kind of get the idea. So it's foundationally, it's a systematic approach that's been taken to try to address this issue. And COVID-19 is where this was tested very heavily. The COVID-19 forecasting exposed lots of limitations in transition models and static models we have for infection. Infection, the very popular model was called SIR, this susceptible, infected, and remediated, where there's 3 different types of people in your constituency. Susceptible meaning people who have not been infected yet, likely to get infected, and there's infected people, and there's people who are remediated. Sometimes all these 3 stages, you loop back and forth, and the number of people in this population keeps varying very heavily. You can use this to basically try to understand some of this infection. It's impossible to do when you have a dynamic process like COVID, where the variants are changing, and the remediated ones, the likelihood of them becoming susceptible, again, is very, very high. Some of the things like Delta variant lasted very short time, but people who got reinfected was very, very quick. It was very unpredictable, basically. The way to understand the dynamism within this requires too many interfaces. It's too difficult to practically do this stuff. It'll be like also almost like reading the newspaper, trying to understand everything that's happening to try to understand the COVID behavior. You've seen the movie security operation centers where there's TV running, whether this and that, and nobody pays attention to that. Nobody can. It's unrealistic. It's totally unpredictable as to how these things might impact the weather or the politics or whatever else. But if you were to use just the data you have, which is primarily the time-based data, which is changing, it could be one univariate or multivariate, meaning it could be just one thing that your trend is tracking, number of malware samples coming in per hour or something like that. And you could use that to try to understand if this pattern is actually sustainably changing and what are the dynamics changing it. And the response to emergent behavior should be timely and should be efficient. Simple things like we ran out of ventilators again and again during COVID infection. We could not even understand how to do exactly what we did 3 months before when a new type of variant came around. So the adaptive models help you basically respond to this in a consistent way after a new change has been introduced into your dynamic process. So this is repeating a little bit more of what I said, the single process behavior. I told you about the SIR-like model. I'll talk about that a little bit. And then the SIR model, some of the traditional problems is we try to calculate the slopes of a curve, which is called the infection rates, and using that to predict how much more things are happening right now. And there's a recovery rate, which is actually compensating to that. So you'll draw curves that basically show the infection rate and recovery rate. Somewhere in between is how well you're able to maintain your population from getting really ill. And there's a lot of, like I talked about, homogeneous assumption that these 3 lines of the curve are very simple, but they're very complicated when you have a new variant of a virus, a new variant of infection, or even a new news event that makes people come to the hospital thinking they have COVID when they didn't have COVID, or people who don't go to the hospital because they're scared everybody who goes to the hospital dies. And things like that are very, very, very soft things that you didn't think are part of this, this response that you need to do to maintain a way to sustain through this difficult change that's going on, right? The point is, again, saying past is not simple. In real-world systems, the multiple interacting processes are influencing each other. Some of these things, if you really pay attention to, you will not be able to scale, you will not be able to keep up. And the parameters that actually impact these things are also changing. And I talked a little bit about the unpredictable external events. We found even the misinformation and the other campaigns done by all these social media also had an impact on the number of patients we're seeing, their behaviors and their expectation of what they're going to get from coming to the hospital. Some of them wanted a ventilator when they didn't even have COVID or when they didn't even have an infection that was serious enough. So all this was basically their fear response, which forced the medical system to have to adapt to these situations. All right. The adaptive logistic model that I'm talking about, it takes all these nonlinear behaviors using a least square optimization method to regularize the way these things are happening. And when you combine them together, you can actually have a linear combination of all these nonlinear functions, which will give you a very good perspective of what happened in the past. All right? There's a way to do a weighted sum. So when you use weights, the risk you have typically, the weights are too sensitive. Even in any of the LLMs, you know how scary the weights are, how powerful the models are in changing something. In this weighted sum method, it's very simple. You actually do use simple weights depending on the time it happened. That's all you care about. You don't care about how big the impact is, but the time of the event and the end of the time of the event is all that you use. It's quite much simpler, basically. It gives you less parameters to tweak to confuse yourself. It gives you more control over understanding what happened in the past, all right? I talked to you a little bit about the SIR model, the three-stage way of looking at it. So this is the susceptible users who, talking about infection specifically, susceptible people to an infection. And there's the infected people, and there's people who are remediated. And this is a very legacy, very simple model. The stochastic model that looks at the lower way of doing it is basically you can treat this like a Markov chain. Markov chain is nothing complicated. Basically, 3 stages exist, and there's probabilities of somebody who is susceptible becomes infected, and then from infected, he gets healed and goes back to susceptible. Similarly, he could stay infected forever. That's the PII, probability of a person remaining in that stage. And there's infected to recovered or remediated. And once they reach recovered, they can remain recovered or come back to becoming infected or even jump into becoming susceptible. So this makes a little bit more sense, but even this cannot keep up when the dynamics is too complex, meaning there's 3 layers of similar SIR models needed to understand one infection, which we call COVID. So this is how native life and real life is. Real life events are very complex. Even if you model like this, you have to have like 5 of these models, and their relationship to each other also is complex, whether one particular infection actually impacts the other types of people who are infected as well. And all the social and the unpredictable things that happen on the soft side also can impact how your model keeps up with something. All right. So this is the ALM model that actually changes the whole way of thinking about this problem. The way we look at it is each one of those, like the SIR method you saw, would be one of these functions. We can have a logistic mixture of all these functions, and using optimized least square, it's very simple. Don't get afraid of the math here. The simplicity here is basically each one of these patterns you saw are distinct functions, and we can add them. And if say each one of these functions have a role in deciding how the future looks like, but at some point in time they become less and less important, and some point in time they completely disappear. So that's really what this optimization layer gives us. The least square optimization layer helps us slowly understand how the logistic model is no longer significant. And we do that primarily by doing the change point detection. Change point detection is a very, very popular field now. Please make sure you understand it. It's a very, very powerful way to understand data. If you Google, there's so much literature that's come out, and it's very, very simple today with scikit and the Python toolkits that are there with all the advanced computing that you can have. You can easily model something and understand what the change points are. The innovation here is using the change points to try to understand how all these nonlinear functions are working together and how we can really interpret them. We don't care if the event is because of a social behavior or it's because of some other emergent behavior. We only care that it's impacting us. Many times when you're sitting in the SOC and your manager comes and tells you he heard something in the news, what is the impact of it? You say you have no idea. But here you can watch just your data to see what the impact of that news he's asking you about is. That's really what you end up doing by watching as an operation research role within your incident response system, that you can actually watch these things happening that actually is a response to something external, right? So don't freak out by the equation. It's not that complicated. It's basically each one of those functions is being summed up. The big sigma, that's what it stands for. And each one of these functions is actually a nonlinear way in which your behavior has changed. It's nothing exciting than that. That the way they're added together is basically understood by this optimized least square method. All right. So all of this is very transparent for you. If you use the model we have, we actually already have this code available. You can try it against your data, your instant data, or any other data you have. It's designed for univariate, but you can easily adapt it to multivariate data as well. So here's an example of how we basically went through some of these nonlinear dynamics. If you were to look at this graph, it'd be easy to see at some point in time in the graph, you saw this change, which you would say is an obvious change that actually is has impacted the way you'll respond, meaning you had number of events, say about 0.5 million, and within a short time, you're up to 1 million. If you're able to follow this normal trend, you would have been in 1 million somewhere there. So this happened much earlier. You'll see this is a trend, and there's a change here. There's some even inflection points where the graph is going to a negative slope. All these changes are happening. Be tempted to think you'll understand this data, but if you use change point to understand this data, you'll actually find there's a change point even before that event happened, which actually you see there. All right. These are things you can do only with the math trick of trying to go back with this data to calculate when all change point happen. So those two change points are a little bit easier to see. You'd see very easily that there was a change in the amount of. This is actually a very specific data with water levels in Lake Mead in Illinois. So the method is expected to be very transparent about any type of data you use. So you might find this is also interesting. Although you might have expected another change point here, actually there was no real change point, meaning you can still model and be able to predict through this time without too much loss of response time. All right. But the other things you'll find is where you didn't expect, you're seeing a lot of different change points. These change points are very powerful. What they help you see is, in some way, either the last, all these strange infection rates you saw or change rates you saw has disappeared, making your curve look very different at the end. And this behavior is very difficult to model. And if you were to predict, you would think this is the function f1, very early that happened. There's fn at the very end. There's many of these can be seen as distinct functions. You would think f1 has a long-term impact. It has had a long-term impact, but it disappears at some point in time. This is what the adaptive model automatically take care of. It'll automatically find out how long these past nonlinear events have lasted in influencing your data. All right? So all these change points give you a powerful way to start predicting your data levels after into the future, basically. You're able to forecast now with a lot more reliability than if you had to assume this particular change you saw here is a permanent change, or I need to basically keep ramping up my staff to address something that looked so nonlinear for a short time. All right? So that's really what that function is. Like I told you, there's an addition of all of these functions together, these nonlinear functions in a linear pattern, and by using their weights properly, you can actually find out how long these functions last into your future, right? I won't bore you with this. I'll leave this for you. Basically, it really compares it to the earlier model we talked about, the SIR-like model, where you use some static methods to understand how a particular infection rate is really impacting you. But this basically gives you a built-in adaptation to what is happening in the future. You don't have to really be concerned about some of the nonlinear behaviors that may not last as long. No? Like I told you, the ALM that we've been trying to use these guys have been really influencing in trying to use it in all these different areas of science, epidemiology. You talked about COVID quite a bit. The Lake Mead is the model I showed you just a few minutes ago. In economics, the price index trends, the consumer price index trends are very, very unpredictable. They're very, very highly impacted by social events and news and things like that. And social media, we did a research on the viral news spread. Twitter before it became X. That's the time when Twitter was being used for viral news trends, and how viral news trends transferred from other social media like Facebook into Twitter and became popular. And in cybersecurity, we've done multiple things. The only public data we can talk about here is the CVE data we used to try to predict how the CVE data changes over time, and using that to predict how many more events we expect soon. All right, I just want to also recognize the CVE data. Other people have been doing research on this. Ben Edwards, I believe, is from BitSide, and Patrick Garrity and Jerry Gamblin. These are famous names who have been working in this area. So I want to recognize they've done similar research, and they found these change points, but none of them have really looked at how these, they spend more time to understand how these change points happen, and how where and why they happen was more the focus of their work. They didn't really do anything about forecasting and trying to see if something like this were to happen in the future, how quickly will we know that this is a sustained change, all right? Similarly, the work done by Patrick Garrity has been more, if there's a change in CVE count, is it because we added new CVE numbering authorities, or new companies came in to try to publish their CVE? Is that the reason? So they're still explaining the past. They're still trying to understand what the past is, using this basically using the graph of the CVE change and trying to predict how it happened, less about what is going to happen in the future, and if this happens again in the future, how to respond. All right. Similarly, the pattern changing over time has been used so many different ways to understand the past of CVE data. I think I should move fast into showing you the online change point method. That's the very last important feed. So if you do your search, I want you guys in your operations center to definitely consider bringing an operation researcher just to see what type of resourcing problems you have. How many of your events are being left behind because of you're not able to scale up with your resources? So the online change point method really helps you see if something that is like that happened in the past is happening to you right now. This is a very simple technique too, although it looks complicated. You can do it repetitively many times. The same thing that was done in the past can be used to understand what is happening right now as you step into the future and you're collecting data. I'll give you a simple example of the CVE data that we've been tracking. So this is an example of our CVE data tracking. We used it to, there's the logical workflow we have is basically we start with the most recent data input that came in, and we keep the trend of the data in memory of how long the data we have today for CVE starts from 1999 or so. The whole data set is with us. We have all these big events that happen in the CVE board that made the CVE program adapt and become very fast in absorbing more CNAs and putting out more vulnerability notices. And all those trends can be predicted with a lower and upper bound. That's what you're seeing here. So if you're able to maintain your staffing within this bound, you basically can address all the problems, is the whole idea of this ALM method, right? I'm almost out of time. Many have quoted this thing. I'll say it again. This is something important to understand. All models are wrong. Some models are useful. I think this ALM method is a very powerful method. It may not be exactly what you need, but it's something worth for you to really look into. If you see your forecasting resources for any type of your operations center that you're not able to keep up, you can basically use this method to see how good the prediction into the future looks like and how easily you're able to adapt. I believe I have 9 seconds left. I just run this live demo of us predicting this lake meat data that I was just showing you earlier. So this is actually a live demo of, this was written in Rust. The whole live demo shows you how quickly the prediction model or the forecasting model is actually able to keep up with some data that's changing within minutes. So this is very, very fast changing the caseload events against time and how we are able to adapt very quickly to all the changes that we see. And it's all because, like you saw in the past, all the different change points you saw here in the past is being considered automatically into the future, and there's no need for us to really panic whether the past is going to permanently influence the future, and you can quickly respond to any changes that comes in. All right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll leave you with this. What kind of forecasting issues you are facing for your SOC or for your operations center? What type of data are you not able to track? What type of things is really pushing the limits of your CSERTs or the national level response centers? How would you want to see this happen? There are two big words I want you to look at for your change point detection methods. SK Times library has a whole bunch of good change point detection tools, and Ruptures is another one that's also very popular. These two tools are something you can just Google and find out. You can try to implement them very quickly with your data to see if the data trends are actually able to really predict and find the change points that you knew happened in the past. All right? And I always like to take people into implementation. I really have pushed my own team also to try to implement this. So we are hoping to run a website live that actually uses the CV data that's public to find out how quickly we're able to find how the future is changing as things happen. Finally, this is another funny one I want to leave you with. Somebody did this graph to show how CV data has changed according to the Pope of the current administration. So you can come up with really stupid answers sometimes to really difficult questions. So our purpose is not try to understand whether Pope Francis is responsible for the 280,000 CVs we got. That's not the purpose. The purpose is how do we respond to this, irrespective of who it is the Pope or whatever is happening to politics. We don't really care. We as operations, we want to put our blinds on and work to try to address what is coming and how quickly we can address what is coming. All right. I think that's the end. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry I just went 2 minutes over. We'll open up for questions now.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And if we have any questions, please step up to the mics on the sides.
I'm sure it's okay. Thank you for the presentation. On behalf of Latin America, Pope Francis is used to CVE, so he's just like, oh, this is normal. But I'm from incident response, and the closest that I have done something like modeling is data analytics in a different company. So what will be the starting point for our operations center to start doing the investment on this type of forecasting?
Yeah, the best thing to see in your operation center is typically you already have one of the operators who has this inclination for operations research. You can see them, you can pick them out and try to spend time with them to understand how do they understand the past, what do they do with it. So I would say equip him with these tools, SK time, Ruptures, change point detection, to just understand the past. If they're able to really predict the past, those tools are very simple to use today. You can really just, you can even put it into your chat GPT and ask for a Ruptures example. There's so many example codes for running predictions of the past. So you can have them run that and see how comfortable they are with the answers they get. And once you have a Ruptures running, it's very simple to adapt it into ALM. So that'll be, I'd say, first help them understand the past. Like Kierkegaard said, life is understood backward. You need to understand what happened in the past. But you have to move forward with it, and you can give them some confidence about how to use this for prediction. All right? Sure. Any other questions? All right, thank you for coming early in the morning. I'm good.